Welcome, John. It's a pleasure to welcome you and to talk to you. You define L'Atelier as a foresight company. Generally speaking, what are the technologies you would strongly advise European public and private actors to invest in the short, in the middle terms, to go on existing in the ever fiercer international competition?
Of course. So one interesting thing that we do is we build engines that mine a lot of data so we can understand what the most significant emerging technologies are going to be over the next 10 years. And we can clearly see one example of an enormous effort globally now towards quantum computing. And I think it's an area in which the European Union can make significant steps towards being a global leader. One interesting thing that we've discovered is that there are a number of European countries that have a strong footprint in cryogenics. And that might seem peculiar, but actually the refrigeration technology for cryogenics is very similar for that used in quantum computing. So there is already an existing base here in the EU that will enable a concerted effort block-wide towards developing stronger quantum computing facilities.
John, it's important to know that L'Atelier is part of BNP Paribas, which is an international long-standing banking group. What does it mean for a bank to deal with innovation and digital technologies? Second question, can digital help the financial sector become sustainable as it does for other industries?
It means different things for different banks and in different regions. I think one thing that we're seeing right now, and this is a response to your second question as well, is that banking is changing and sustainability in banking is changing. It doesn't mean what it used to mean. I think now there's areas of sustainability quite clearly that are environmental. There are areas that are the business model. One of those real concerns that we're seeing emerging is that a younger population of people in the developed world, namely Western Europe and North America, Australia, New Zealand, etc., they are finding it more and more difficult to access homes, to buy homes. And as a consequence of this, we're seeing more and more frustration and more protest and activism around economic inequalities. And one of the big challenges for all banks is to be part of a financial system that is able to facilitate social mobility and a lower level of economic inequality across their constituent customers, and to be part of a system that's more effective at managing broader economic equality moving forward. And that will help banks be significantly more sustainable. And a large part of that is improving their digital capacity. And if we do that effectively, we will be able to provide services that facilitate higher levels of social mobility and broader equity across society.
Let's talk about you. Social mobility is one of your main subjects of research at this time. Can you tell us more, and what can we expect from digital technologies?
Well, social mobility for us, outside of climate change, social mobility is one of the really significant challenges for this generation. I think we're still living in the footprint, in the shadow of 2008. And one of the consequences of 2008 is that there's a whole generation of people for whom their long-term financial future is insecure. They're unable to own their own home. And when you live in a society where the average person earning an average wage can't afford an average home close to where they work, you will see higher levels of social friction and frustration. You will see more activism and protest. You'll see more extreme politics emerge as well. And I think that what we're seeing now, both in terms of the political norms that we're now experiencing, and also this enormous shift towards virtual environments and virtual economies, whether that be cryptocurrencies or whether it be NFTs and the broader metaverse. I think social mobility is driving so much of this because the metaverse now is where hope exists for a whole generation of young people for whom traditional economy is failing. And clearly, if you can never afford a home, if you're never going to have a mortgage, it changes your relationship quite drastically with the bank. And it means that fintech propositions become much more attractive to people for whom they don't have a significant relationship with banks. So at the moment, digital is transforming this space. It's providing new opportunities and influence in the gig economy, sharing economies, but in the future as well, in data economies and environmental economies. That's where we're likely to see more and more opportunity emerge for a generation of people who aren't going to be able to afford the lifestyle that their parents had on their current incomes and with their current economic opportunity level.
Crystal clear. By extension, last question, what kind of transformation do you anticipate regarding work and organization? According to you, what would be the future or futures of work?
Well, I think it's very rare that we see change happen quickly. Usually change takes decades and decades. And it's only when you reflect 20 or 30 years later that you can see the difference. It's why we all grew up with stories from our grandparents and from our parents telling us what the world was like when they were kids, because it took them that long to be able to see that difference. But we're living at one of the rare moments in time where we can see the change happen day to day, week to week, month to month. And quite clearly now, people are leaving the office and they're working from home or working from different places. And that is changing the dynamic of our relationship with work in quite a dramatic way. And I think we're likely to see that continue. Again, coming back to social mobility, forcing people to work in an office in an urban area is putting a hidden tax on people. You're forcing them to pay very high levels of rent or very high mortgages in order to work in those urban environments. What's happening now is allowing people to move out of major cities or move to second cities or to the countryside is allowing them to reduce the amount of monthly expenditures they have, increasing their discretionary income, and in the process allowing them to become more socially mobile. So work itself is totally interconnected with this movement towards improving social mobility and to the metaverse as well, where we're seeing these new opportunities emerge. I expect that in the coming years, we'll see a significant shift in the relationship between the employee and the employer, the nature of work contracts, and also the expectation that people will have a single job that will pay their whole income. Clearly, there is a trend at the moment towards people having supplemental incomes from supplemental activities that they do. And I think that's likely to continue in the long term.
Thank you so much, John.
Thank you, Ron.